and welcome to our presentation. My name's Paul Robinson and I am the musical director, arranger and producer for Songs I Want to Play.
My name is Adelina and I'm the art director, illustrator and animator for the project.
So I guess a good place to start is why and how it all came about. Well, essentially, we can attribute it back to lockdown and the fact that COVID pretty much devastated and decimated the music industry. A lot of my colleagues, including myself, found ourselves in a position where all our freelance work was cancelled for an unforeseeable amount of time at that point, which made us have a think about, well, what can we do, you know, and essentially the idea was born out of that in the sense that what we really thought would be nice was to keep ourselves busy and sane. We would rearrange and recreate classic songs that we wished we'd been on the original sessions for. So we're all session musicians, and we just thought it would be a nice way whilst we were in a lockdown to be really creative, and that is also where Adelina's skills were called upon, in the sense that myself and Ads have worked together on a lot of research projects, namely to do with music and the incorporation of visuals. So it would be worth handing over to you to talk about your input.
I think what's interesting is you mentioned about the collaboration and the fact that there was not really much outlet in terms of creativity. I think for me it was very similar, although I'm not a musician. It didn't stop me from feeling slightly at a loss in terms of what I was going to do with all my time in lockdown. Yeah. So it wasn't really a question of, you know, do I have the skills to do this? I kind of had to develop the skills to fit your project, which what makes it really interesting how Songs I Want to Play developed, because I am not an animator. I'm originally an illustrator. I used to be a designer. Well, you never really stop being a designer, but I'm sort of an untrained, self-taught animator. And certainly before Songs I Want to Play, my only name to a film was a film that I directed and animated for a BBC commission. So I've been fairly new to animation, and this is why this was so interesting, because it just came at the right time when we couldn't really go into university, and suddenly we had to find things to keep us going. And I think this was almost like a time meant to be to develop something like this, which 16, almost 17 months later has grown to a sizable project where we almost can't quite believe how much it's developed and how much our skills are different now to how they used to be. Yeah,
absolutely. That's very true. And I don't think anything could really. I think we started it thinking, you know, this would be a project that we just, you know, maybe us two would be proud of. But it's grown since then, and we've now got quite a large following on social media, and you know, 20 releases later, and I think that's testament to the fact that we've got an incredibly robust system of how we do things. I think that's probably why it works so well. You know, how efficient it is in the process of getting things together, and I think the good thing about this project is because it's been how we've overcome things at a distance. You know, being, you know, during lockdown, how do you get 14 musicians to play in time, to play to, you know, a new arrangement? How do we pull all that together, and then how do we come up with nice visuals that complement that?
Yeah, and what's unique about this as well is the fact that, thinking back to the lockdown, a lot of people were always talking about not having structure. So a lot of creatives and students even would say to me and to colleagues, and really a lot of sort of the creative community would get this message of, I can't find the motivation to do things. I can't find myself the structure, because time becomes very amorphous when there are no things to get up for. Days just blend into nights. And I suppose for us, this was really a way of measuring time, because we suddenly had to have an actual timetable, of an actual schedule of how things need to be out, and we imposed deadlines on ourselves.
Very strict ones, you know.
They were quite restrictive in the sense that somebody would have thought, well, why are you pressuring yourself? to produce 2 videos a month, which you remember initially.
Yeah, initially that's what we started doing. Yeah.
What it was like. But then actually having time restrictions and having those kind of real boundaries in which you have to produce something, it's probably the best way forward. And we tell students this all the time. You've got to remember that restriction is often the best way to drive yourself forward, because if you've got too much looseness, it doesn't really help. But it was interesting that the deadlines and the kind of the discipline that we imposed on ourselves made this really much better, because we had to learn, we had to find solutions, and solution problems often lead to the best kind of creative responses.
Well, look at how you have developed between starting with us and you know, to where you are now. The amount of stuff that you've done from an animation standpoint, as you know, is incredible. Really, it's been a massive learning curve, and similar for me in the sense that managing lots of musicians' audio files, getting those into place, managing the production software. It's all been a learning curve from start to finish. My skills as an audio engineer have improved dramatically as a result of that. And I think imposing these deadlines, and especially at a time where there were no external deadlines or things or anything of that nature, I think it actually helped us. And I think in many ways, especially my colleagues in the musical side of things, it gave them a purpose for that year and a half. You know, it gave them something to really get their teeth into and look forward to hearing the results. You know, we were quite secretive in when we would play the final product as well to the rest of the band. So they would, you know, send us stuff and then be really excited and wait to hear how it has all come together. And I think it gave them a nice focus and a nice bit of, you know, just something to look forward to each month when we would do the next release.
It's really interesting how that also generated itself. It was sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, because the minute we started treating it like a real project where we would release things with thought behind it, so we wouldn't just say, oh well, here's a bit of a track, you do what you want with it, or see where it's at. It was far more, I suppose, not regimented, but it was far more organised in the sense that we knew what we wanted out of certain things, but everything was checked at every stage. And what's unique about this project, I think, as well, is the fact that we don't just have a piece of music that you produce and send me and say, right, take this away and I want you to create animation to it.
Yeah.
Almost like a brief. We write the brief.
Yes.
So we are our own. It's like a master's degree in a way for your final major project, where you have to set yourself some aims and objectives. It's a lot like learning, the sense that you know what you want to learn. And I remember every time we released a video, it was always about me making use of a new trick, maybe in After Effects, me trying a new technique, maybe me going into a different animation software, learning how to work across different pieces of software and have a sort of workflow in how to produce these things. And that's probably why stylistically we've produced so many different things. There is no trajectory to this where we can point back and say everything in this is pop rock, or everything is, you know, a certain genre in terms of animation. There is no single aesthetic, because we've let it just play itself out.
Exactly, and that's been the wonderful thing. It's been that rather than me say, okay, we're doing this tune, see what you can come up with, actually what we do is I create a working demo of that said track, and actually from that is the thing that informs your style. You know, you think of it more, almost I think of it as in a visual sense, and you think about the animation from a musical sense. So almost our roles swap over in the sense that when I arrange, I'm thinking, ooh, that I wonder what should I draw there? I wonder if I put this chord in, maybe that'll infer what she puts at that point. And similarly, when you get that track, then at that point you think, oh, well, I've heard something here. I'm thinking maybe something UPA 60 style, and each time we do that, we inform each other in many respects, don't we?
Yeah, because it's almost like you borrow the other person's vision.
Yeah.
And it's not a singular vision of somebody imposing a brief. You're not saying to me, I want this and you must produce this. You're saying, well, I think you could do this, but let's see what you come up with.
Yeah.
And actually there's that element of perpetual surprise where it just kind of moves itself in the way it has to move. But it's very much about distance. And I think with designers, especially visual people, it's very hard to work from, you know, you do work traditionally in studios, but it's very hard to work in isolation. That's why you find a lot of painters choose to go and work in shared studios where they can often speak to someone, because it can be a very solitary experience. Similar to musicians, it's very hard to spend your life just being kind of recording musicians solitary somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to interact because, you know, well, especially in the rhythm section, you just cannot. But even so, in lockdown, what this made us realise is how valuable sometimes that kind of, I suppose, solitude is, where you can just sit down and really focus on something and you're not being distracted by other things. So it made us value, I think, more the fact that we can work together now, properly work together, of course, within, you know, sort of the limitations that are still in place. But actually, it made us more kind of proactive, because we wanted to put something out even better and even bigger than we would normally do.
Each time we came back, you know, we might have found a new bit of software or a new plugin for Logic that I wanted to work with, or it might be, you know, a few extra musicians that had been added, whatever it might be. We were always trying to outdo the previous one, and I think that's a great work ethic as well. It makes it keeps you fresh, and it keeps you enthused about the project.
Yeah, and there was no fear of making mistakes, in the sense that, of course, from a musical point of view, you can't make many mistakes, because some of it is well, all of it is actually quite a calculated exercise, and you've got to be correct in the way you write things and arrange things. But from a visual point of view, it was so experimental. Not one part of me ever felt that I had to keep to a very restrictive way of working, or I never had the sense that I had to produce a certain length of video. Everything just kind of produced itself naturally, and that was really nice. So I think when we speak to students about this kind of stuff, and we talk about experimentation and risk-taking and play, the fear of not making a mistake is probably 90% of this process. And although you never want to put something poor out into the kind of ether for everyone to hear, or everyone to see, part of it is actually, yes, we did have a lot of meltdowns. I mean, thinking about summertime, you know, computers crashing.
Computers breaking, full stop.
Computers breaking stuff.
Yeah, not just crashing.
Yeah, After Effects suddenly not caching any of the stuff that I was doing, or, you know, files just going corrupt. That stuff is normal, and then you just start again, and you have to take it in your stride and go, right, well, let's remember that this is a self-inflicted project.
Yes.
It's not someone whipping us.
And I was absolutely fine after the week in the Priory. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course.